a link to my personal Google AT site for the IU, but just know that the information provided in this document and all of the documents that are posted is not intended to constitute legal advice, and it really is not legal advice. So just know that those resources are there just for your convenience to kind of open up your lenses to think about special education and accessibility as you might be moving to a virtual platform or other types of that pencil paper products that you might be sending home. So just so we kind of get all on the same page, here's just a couple of definitions to know and understand, and we'll talk briefly about most of them. But IEP, Individualized Education Plan, IDEA, Least Restrictive Environment, Americans with Disabilities Act, English as a Second Language, and then also our English learners, EL students, and FAPE, Free Appropriate Public Education. And this is really where a lot of the concern sometimes lies with that continuity of education piece. So just making sure that if LEAs and are considering those options, that we consider how we can address FAPE and special education students, as well as English learners and gifted IEP students. So obviously we know that there's legislation dictating education services and provisions. It's federal law that was changed and most recently updated to IDEIA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act in 2004. And the purpose is to ensure that American children with disabilities have access to fundamental services, including special education. We need to make sure that the students that are identified as having a disability in one of the categories that we'll talk about later are provided opportunities to meaningfully access and participate with the general education curriculum. So we all need to think about, and this is kind of, again, just a brief general overview, so we can kind of think about through our lens, what is special education and what does that mean when we're thinking about virtual platforms. But it kind of boils down to making sure that students who are identified with a disability and the need for specially designed instruction are provided a free and appropriate public education through the IEP. That IEP might entail accommodations, modifications, assistive technology, and additional specifically designed instruction that we need to think about as we move to different platforms rather than that face-to-face in a brick and mortar school. So we really need to think about all of those facets of what a student's IEP might say. Also, to note that schools and families have rights under this federal law. Parents have the right to request an evaluation at any time. The evaluation is completed at no cost to the parents. Schools can then not exclude any student with a disability from a free and appropriate public education. Evaluation practices need to be non-discriminatory, and they must be used to determine if a child has a disability, and additionally, if they need specially designed instruction to achieve that meaningful participation. Students also have the right to be educated in the least restrictive environment. That means with their peers without disabilities as much as able. Parents do have the right to request mediation, as do schools. And schools are required to collaborate with parents as well as adolescent students age 14 and older during that transition time to design and implement special education programs. Again, though, parents have a right to due process if they believe that their child is not receiving FAPE in that LRE, or if any of the principles of the federal law are not being followed. So to deem a student eligible for special education, there's a multidisciplinary evaluation process completed by a team. The team members, it depends again on the suspected disability, but it ranges from parents to the child, school psychologist, teachers, speech language pathologists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, school administrators, guidance counselors can be included, and then other members of the team that are deemed necessary. But I think it's important as we think about whether or not a student is eligible for special education that we remember that special education is a service, not a place. It doesn't matter where the student is being educated, that special education is a service. That specially designed instruction, those accommodations and modifications all can take place within different platforms. And IEP teams always should be meeting with the assumption that a student is going to remain in a general education classroom unless deemed necessary for a different place or environment by that team. So just know that even though things might be moving to a virtual platform, special education may still be provided in that platform. It doesn't necessarily go off of just the place that the student is or that environment. Here are some of the disability categories, all of the disability categories actually, including autism, deafblindness, deafness, emotional disturbance. I'll just let you kind of look through those. So as a result of an evaluation process, one of these disability categories will be noted as a primary. Students might also have a secondary disability category diagnosis as well. And then based on that, supports are then implemented and discussed with the team through the use of an IEP developed to meet those needs that were identified during the evaluation process. An IEP is a legal document that must be followed, and every child's IEP is customized to meet their individual needs. Here are the supports that might be provided. And I know at this point it is kind of a minute by minute to how some of these things might be supported as districts are kind of putting a plan in place, but just to kind of know that these are some of the services that we need to be thinking about to be able to provide. So then how could disabilities impact student performance both inside a brick and mortar classroom and or virtually or remotely? We need to think about vision and hearing, attention issues, fine and gross motor skills, the need for instruction and cognitive strategies, that specially designed instruction piece, organization skills and executive functioning, oral language difficulties, processing, also those English language learners, other academic issues, including reading difficulties, written language process problems, and mathematical difficulties. And to address, and I do hope to bring up just a couple places to kind of get you thinking about whatever platform that you're using. Accessibility options have really been booming. So depending if you're using Microsoft platform or Google platform, whatever platform you might be utilizing, there are a lot of built-in accessibility options like Immersive Reader or Google Voice Dictation that might address some of those concerns, again, that are linked out there, but I can specifically point you in the right direction if you're having any kind of specific questions like that. And then obviously we need to think about that social skill piece. And also, I don't think it's in there right now, but overall globally, not just our students and ourselves, but that kind of mental health piece as well, which might tie into some of those behavioral difficulties. So how do we get there? You know, when I say we need to think about all of those kind of issues and how disabilities might manifest, we get there through what's called universal design for learning. This has been kind of a buzzword for at least, I'd say, 5 years, maybe even longer. But it's really coming to the forefront now that we're thinking about embedding flexible strategies into the curriculum during the planning process so that all students can access a variety of learning solutions. So I know that while this is a crazy time and things are going very rapidly, things are evolving rapidly, it's important to think about this because we are in the planning stage, and if we think about and plan for our students with the most the hardest to reach, we will be able to reach all of the students a little bit better. So, you know, this UDL is not the same as differentiated instruction, as that's more of a retrofit approach. Once the instruction is completed, then you kind of go back and look at things. But this universal design for learning thinks about planning and that planning stage and providing opportunities for your students methodically and strategically. So this is just a picture that kind of reinstates and reinforces universal design for learning came from the field of architecture and universal design. So thinking about, you know, what is the end product here is to kind of get up this little slope, and then there's multiple ways to do it. But the entrance here was built on the principles of universal design because it gives multiple access points and some supports and scaffolds, including like the railings, the curb cut. So a lot of times people think, you know, this was designed for just one population, might be a person in a wheelchair or a person with mobility issues, but it also helps a lot of different people, folks who might be using a stroller, pulling a cube of educational resources right into their work building. It might help people who have, you know, a broken leg or a sore knee or a sprained ankle, maybe some people who are slightly out of shape. So thinking about all of the people that benefit from something that might have been designed just for one population. This is another picture that's really been going around the conversation of equity at this point, and really looking at the evolution from that picture on the left, where everybody kind of gets the same thing, but they still have a barrier in the way. Then we're changing and kind of providing some additional scaffolds, but the barrier's still in the way. And then that picture on the right where we're removing that barrier. And that's really what universal design for learning aims to achieve, is removing the barriers of access for all students. So what does that mean for us? As educators, it means that we must identify barriers and plan for all of our students. Don't consider what is causing the barrier. It's not the student. Barriers in education are similar to those in architecture, where the students and their disabilities or learning differences are not the barrier, right? So the barrier isn't the person in the wheelchair, it's the stairs. So we have to think about the materials, the tools, the resources, and the strategies that we're providing that might present a barrier to any one of our students. So we will look a little bit, again, this is like weeks worth of information, kind of digestible into a 30-minute clip, but these are the principles of universal design for learning: providing multiple means for representation, providing multiple means for action and expression, and providing multiple means of engagement. And those are all based on different areas and pathways, circuits in the brain. And they include the affective network, or the why of learning. So this is really speaking to that engagement piece, and knowing that our learning is driven by goals. So that first kind of thing to think about is that learners get engaged and stay motivated because their goals are driving their nervous system. So making sure that we provide that explicit goal. It's kind of like putting in an address in your GPS, right? If you put in your address in the GPS, there might be 3 different methods of transportation or means to get there. But there would be exponentially more if you don't have a specific target in mind. So things that you can think about when providing those multiple means of engagement, providing learning choices, audio-visual, hands-on, multimedia projects, web quests, cooperative learning projects. And if you're working on some asynchronous or like they work on their own and then you come back together or whatever that might look like, having some of these options and letting students choose which means they want to access some of this content is important, and it really drives up engagement. The book creator app is a great way to kind of get kids engaged, not only for the representation and the action and expression, but really thinking about the different facets of what interests students and how they learn best. Multiple means of representation is also another principle of UDL. It's really thinking about how we gather facts and categorize what we see, hear, and read. It's the what of what we learn. And learners differ in the ways that they perceive and comprehend information. So those with sensory disabilities or learning disabilities or language and cultural differences have different ways of perceiving and comprehending information. So definitely keeping that in mind so that we know that if we're presenting things that are visual and our students really need to be able to hear it, we need to think about providing multiple means of presenting that content. Making sure that we provide access to vocabulary and information on background information. And Don Johnston has some great resources out there that are free to try for a little while, as far as some of that helping with vocabulary and that understanding written expression. Again, thinking about that learning task, their previous experience, and then designing for that variability. So providing the multiple options. And then we think about the strategic network, or those kind of multiple means for action and expression. Students are going to want to build on their strengths, but they're going to need to be provided some frequent feedback as well. But the brain has incredible plasticity, and understanding that is important for educators because it helps us recognize that learning is a constant growth process. So keeping that in mind as well. And that, we can be thinking about providing graphic outlining tools, keyboarding with spelling supports, something like Co-Writer Universal from Don Johnston, or Google dictation, providing a method for kids to podcast, or using Flipgrids, letting them just draw and take a picture of it and send it to you. Skits, graphs, collages, there's so many different ways that students can express what they know. And again, does it matter how you get to, your home when you put that in your GPS, as long as you're getting there? Doesn't matter if you took 219 or 22 or the highway or the turnpike, not necessarily. So then again, thinking about some accessibility, and again, I'm running short on time, so I will ask that if you're on, to go into that resources drop-down link and take a look at this video regarding accessibility from the Office of Civil Rights. It's about a 7-minute clip, and I think that it really hits the point of accessibility better and more eloquently than I could, but thinking about some accessibility concerns and then some support ideas. Thinking about print and visual access, you know, can you create some audio files, or can you have your students use something like immersive reader where they can hear whatever's on the screen read to them aloud? Can you provide and maybe find different audiobooks that are, you know, provided through our Overdrive or our Libby app? Overdrive is that Pennsylvania repository of library, and there's a lot of different audiobooks that kiddos could listen to. That's a free app if you have a library card. Thinking about making sure that we provide image descriptions or audio descriptions or alternative text if you provide a picture for students to look at, because our kiddos, maybe with some visual access concerns, and even processing concerns, you know, that text might help a lot of students, maybe not just with visual disabilities. Thinking about hearing access, providing captioning, or, you know, a printed text that will go with audio files or videos. And then again, thinking about language, like speech and language delays, English language learners, auditory processing concerns, providing some asynchronous opportunities so that you're not putting your students on the spot, maybe in a face-to-face Zoom, so that they kind of have some time to process what you're saying to them, making sure that you provide clear, concise directions. And Microsoft has some great translation services as well. So, but I think that we need to remember, most importantly, that not only students with disabilities benefit from accessible content and inclusion strategies. So much research tells us that all students are benefiting. And when you think about, again, that assessment piece and looking at it, when you have all of these students that bring together different learning strengths and variabilities, thinking about that end goal is really the most important, making sure that our goal, our learning goal, is the target and not necessarily how we're getting there. So if I can, just maybe for a minute or two, I wanted to just highlight some of the resources that we have. So this is the Google site. And up at the top, you'll see the technology for e-learning. And then you'll see my Twitter handle there. So I'm trying to constantly tweet out all of the different things, you know, that are exploding right now, as far as companies opening up free resources and providing access to things that typically were pay blocked. But there's a lot of different great resources there. And again, here's providing an equal access to distance curriculum. This is under that resources link as well. But again, just disclaiming that this is just consideration for the reader, but it provides some good options for, like here's Otter AI for captioning, some tips and tricks to make sure that your content is accessible. One thing is, it's called the no mouse challenge. So if you put something out and have no mouse to access whatever page you might be on, that might be, you know, something to think about. There's some links down there as well. Immersive Reader is an extension for Google Chrome and or built right into Microsoft products, that if you have students who, and this is, again, something that we should be thinking about using all the time, and not just for specific kids that might need assistive technology, but utilizing this as an educational technology resource, I think is very important. And then this is the accessibility support resources from tech vendors. So it looks a lot about what are some of those accessibility supports. I did put that in there for Google Classroom, if that's the platform that you're using, or Microsoft. And this is the link that's on my Google site. Down at the bottom, you'll see all of the links for the Windows accessibility through Patent Pod, and from Lindsay Trojanowski from from Microsoft. But this goes over to translation, authoring accessible content, and really so much more, providing templates. And I think that there's some great and valuable resources there. So as I close, I just want to leave you with this caption from Michael Giangreco, but just as you're authoring your content and building your virtual classroom, what is the mindset that you're going to have? Are you going to shovel the stairs first, or are you going to shovel the ramp? And again, there's my email and the Twitter handle in case anybody wants to follow me. You know, my followers have just been booming. But that is all I have. But again, please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. Lots of good resources there. It's almost more than we can show you in a half an hour, definitely more than we can show you in a half an hour, but she did make the links available to all of those, the Google Sites and Google Docs that had even more resources on them. So feel free to hop into that link I put in the chat area earlier. And just so you all are aware, we're doing another webinar tomorrow. The topic will be using Google Classroom for virtual learning. And so that is, we're holding one at 7:30 a.m. and again at noon. So if you want to hop into one of those, you're more than welcome. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Andrea. And we hope you have a good afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.